I'm happy to say the slasher genre is still alive and kicking after all these years. Here's a pairing of two slasher films wrapped around modern issues. This is M.L. Miller Fright's Best in Horror Countdown 2022 through 2023, counting down the best in horror within the window of October 1st, 2022 through September 30th, 2023.
Number 22.
Sick was released on February 13th, 2023. It's streaming on Peacock Plus. It's directed by John Hyams and written by Kevin Williamson and Catelyn Crabb. It's April 2020, the beginning of the quarantine that fisted the world back into your homes for seemingly forever. Everyone is paranoid of germs and each other. Looking for a place to go for the lockdown, Parker, played by Gideon Adlon, and Miri, played by Bethlehem Million, head out to a cabin on the lake in the countryside with supplies aplenty. But when Parker begins getting texts from a stranger who seems to know a whole lot about her and what she's doing at that very moment, it becomes obvious that she has a stalker. Soon, Parker's boyfriend, DJ, played by Dylan Sprayberry, shows up uninvited to the party. But he's not the only one, as there is someone in the shadows with a knife and a hunger for vengeance. Sick is everything one would want in a slasher movie. It's got a masked killer, a remote location, lots of cutlery, and most importantly, a long extended chase scene full of macabre action and exciting violence. The chase scene has become somewhat of a lost art in horror, specifically in slashers. Some of the best scenes from your favorite slashers occur when it's one killer giving his all to add one more to his kill list, and one lone survivor doing everything they can do to avoid it. Sick feels like a beautiful ode to those old slasher films, specifically the Friday the 13th films, so it's appropriate the film premiered last Friday the 13th. Writer Kevin Williamson has expressed his affinity for the Friday the 13th films and shows his love here more thrillingly and expertly than he ever did in the Scream series. Naming key players Jason and Pamela is no mistake. Neither is setting Sick on a cabin by a serene lake. If you're a fan of the Friday the 13th series, you owe it to yourself to check out this electrifying slasher. Sick really doesn't let up for a minute. The opening sequence feels ripped straight from a Scream script, with a killer interacting with a kid via phone, then having the two fight to the death in a small apartment. But after the bombastic opener, things slow down a bit for some getting-to-know-you time, showing that Parker is a little lax on the social distancing, while her friend Miri is more of a rule follower, showing more caution about the guidelines we were all supposed to follow. While the Scream films were full of references to other horror films, Sick is straight-on horror, and any self-referential comedy is reserved for comments about the time of the pandemic. Think of it. The lockdown was the setting for a perfect slasher. Everyone is masked, everyone is home alone. There really was no one out and about to help you. Sick takes full advantage of the shit we all had to go through and forces it through a darkly comic lens. For example, when Parker eludes the killer and is able to flag down a car, the driver asks her where her mask is, not even considering the immediate danger of a killer fast on Parker's heels. It's ludicrous, but Sick does a fantastic job of depicting an especially ludicrous, paranoid time in our history. Gideon Adlon is fantastic as Parker, one of the not-so-wholesome potential victims. She's not your typical bone rack of a gal, and looks more like the girl-next-door types you often saw in the 80s slashers. In the little time that you get to know her, we find that she's quite complex in that she seeks attention, yet often pushes those she courts away. Miri, played by Bethlehem Million, is equally likable, as Parker's best friend, who worries about her, but also wants the best for her. Finally, Dylan Sprayberry plays CJ, who could have played a typical goofy kid just out looking to get laid, but manages to have depth as well. This film allows the viewer a chance to get to know these three characters, and the actor's skill makes you care whether they live or die. Sick has a small cast, but just because it doesn't have a big body count doesn't mean there isn't a lot of bloody action and suspense ratcheted up tight. John Hyams directed Alone, a surprise slasher hit about a girl in a car being followed by a car behind her. Hyams made that simple premise sing with lots of unconventional twists and nonstop action. Hyams continues the trend with Sick. For the last hour, there is barely a minute to catch your breath. There has been a lot of experimental and elevated horror released lately, trying to subvert expectations and stand out as something very, very different from the norm. Then there's Sick, who just does the tried-and-true slasher formula to perfection. There's a reason the slasher film has endured the test of time, and filmmakers John Hyams and Kevin Williamson prove that the subgenre of horror is alive, kicking, screaming, and slashing. While the issue dealt with in the next film might not be as profound as the one in Sick, this Lithuanian slasher still deals with issues that plague kids to this day. We Might Hurt Each Other, aka PENSIVE, aka RUPINTOJELIS, was released on July 11th, 2023. It's streaming on Screambox. It's directed by Jonas Trukanas and written by Titas, Laucius, and Jonas Trukanas. On the day after the high school graduation, the entire graduating class decides to take a trip to a cabin in the middle of nowhere, Lithuania, to party for the weekend. All eyes are on the star athlete, who has plans to head to America to compete with the pros, but one of the more unpopular students, Marius, played by Šarūnas Rapolas Malicius, longs for the attention the star jock receives, including from his girlfriend, Brigita, played by Gabija Bargaleti. But as the party revs up, the kids discover a circle of statues in the middle of a field and begin destroying them, of course, which seems to spark the ire of a masked monster named Algis, played by Marius Repsius, who sharpens his blades and decides to unleash holy vengeance on the vandalizing kids. We Might Hurt Each Other is a fun throwback to 80s slashers, right down to its burned murderer, who bears a very strong resemblance to Cropsy from The Burning, and wears a wooden mask not unlike Jason's hockey mask. The film spends an awful lot of time allowing the viewer to get to know the cast, which gets pretty tedious as nothing really horror-like occurs until about the 45-minute mark. But at least by that time, we know the ins and outs of the various relationships, friendships, and rivalries that the group shares. When the carnage starts, it's quite powerful as the killer simply walks out of the field and starts slashing away at the partygoers. This type of blatant carnage makes things feel more like the chaos of a mass shooting than an "and then there were none" style scenario, as the kids are running around and trying to find a successful hiding place so the killer won't find them. Unfortunately, these dumbass kids choose to all hide in the same spot, making it pretty easy for the killer to wade through them with his cutlery. This leads to one very effective scene where the survivors hide among the dead bodies in order to elude the madman. All of these scenes occur so fast and makes for quite the shocking sequence of events, but man does it take a hell of a long time to get to the good stuff in this movie. There are a few scenes that suggest something awful lurks in the shadows at the cabin as soon as the group show up. The statues are quite ominous. They're tall obelisk-type structures with arms reaching up and covering their faces. There's a hint at some kind of folk supernatural horror going on, but it never really has a payoff. These statues seem to symbolize victims of the past, which tempt the kids to mock and deface them all the more in rebellion. Seeing these kids go nuts on the sculptures reminded me of the fury that occurs at some of the assemblies who tear down monuments and statues in recent years around America. I don't know if this film is making some kind of comment about all of that. It being a Lithuanian film, I kind of doubt it. But I couldn't help but associate the kids' disrespect and disregard for the past with this modern American social dilemma. We Might Hurt Each Other works in establishing its cast with memorable characters. Marius is a complex character, as is Brigita, and while the way their stories advance and develop sort of needed that long build-up we got in the first 45 minutes, but I fear that'll be too long for many viewers who are looking for the horror stuff to happen. I like the look of the killer. It was just different enough from Jason to be fun, while still basically looking a lot like the popular slasher. This isn't a brainless slasher film. It's quite emotionally considerate. If only the lead-up to the killings had been shorter, possibly with some killing occurring away from the group before the killers headfirst rampage into the thick of them, I think this would have felt like a more even movie. As is, it's wobbly, but still a solid slasher once the first drop of blood is finally spilled. As always, feel free to agree, disagree, Or how about you play along at home and give me your own picks for your favorite horror movies? It's October, so let's talk horror. Come back tomorrow for the next level in the Best in Horror Countdown. Be sure to hit all of those pertinent bells and whistles down below, and you'll never miss a post. Happy Halloween, folks.